I'm extremely happy to have with us friends of the college. In our panel discussion today, we have Professor Vittal Suktankar, who started his career in Government College Khandola, moved on to greener pastures, and he has stayed put with Goa Institute of Management, one of the senior faculty at Goa Institute of Management, and also he wears a double hat. He is also the parent of one of our students. A big round of applause to him, ladies and gentlemen. To my right is Mr. Anant Sarkar, no stranger to this college. He is also a parent, but we have brought him as a representative of the industry. He is the assistant editor of Lokmat. He belongs to the fourth pillar of democracy, a fourth pillar which makes views, which forms opinion as far as social issues are concerned. We are extremely happy to have Mr. Anant Sarkar with us. A warm welcome to you, sir. A big round of applause to him, ladies and gentlemen. We also have, if our college runs today, it's because of the input that we get, the students whom get from the higher secondaries. And how could we leave out a higher secondary? We have with us a student, ex-student of our college, now the principal of Vivida Vidya Pratishthans, VR Gaons Memorial Higher Secondary School, Navelim, Mr. Ramesh Sinari. A warm welcome to you, sir. And a big round of applause to him, ladies and gentlemen. Any debate, any discussion on education and more so on higher education cannot leave out the major stakeholder of this whole process. If the education systems exist, it exists because of the students' fraternity. We would have loved to have more of them on board, but to represent the student community, we have Ms. Priyanka Chauhan. She is presently our student who has completed MA Part 1 in Hindi. She is going to MA Part 2 in Hindi. A warm welcome to you, Ms. Priyanka. We are very happy to have you with us here. We have two of our professors. To my extreme left is Professor Seema Rath, who has already made her presentation. Certain questions that we have, I will address to her. We also have Professor Sonia Sirsat with us here. She will also help me as an anchor in case I don't understand, because Priyanka is going to speak in Hindi. If I have to converse and ask certain technical things, I expect Professor Sonia to help me. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the panel. We will be going around this way. I would request each one of them to have their say. This is their personal say. This is not a technical session. This is their personal say on what matters to them, what they feel is whatever part they would like to pick up from the New Education Policy 2020. Just for the information of the panelists here who have come today, we have had our seminar which started yesterday with the first technical session taken by Dr. K.R. Badiger, who spoke on school education. It was chaired by Mr. Sharad Jamkandi from our Faculty of English. We had a second session which continued from where Dr. Badiger left, taken by Dr. Mukund Narvekar, again on higher education, on school education, which was chaired by Mr. Nilesh Natikar. After the tea break, we had Professor Sonia Sirsat opening the innings on higher education, which matters to most of us here. Today's session, the session was chaired yesterday by Mr. Ashok Chodankar from the faculty of our faculty from chemistry. Today's two sessions that we have had so far, the technical session 4 and 5 respectively. The first session of today was engaged by Dr. Vaibhav Chindarkar, which was chaired by Mr. Brian D'Souza. And the second session, where two of our panelists were present, was engaged by Professor Seema Rath from the Faculty of Economics, and which was chaired by Ms. Preeti Pednik. These were sessions in which we looked at issues that encompass the whole new education policy, right from schooling to higher education, and the various issues that are contained in that 66 pages draft. Please remember, the original draft was 424 odd pages. It has been succinctly put, that what Dr. Vaibhav was saying, it is succinctly put into around 66 pages. So this was a draft, this was a document which we deliberated and discussed. The today's session, the panel discussion will be like this. I would request each of those to have their first say on what matters to them, what is their opinion on education at various. They can pick up just one issue and talk on that, maybe spanning around 5 minutes or so. Then I have come up with certain issues where I would like to elicit the views of these important panel members, and then subsequently I will throw the forum open for you to interact with the panelists. I am very happy to invite Professor Vittal Suktankar to open the innings for us today. Professor Vittal Suktankar, over to you.
Good morning, dignitaries on the days, my friends. It's really an honor to come over here and be a part of my alma mater. I have been a part of Government College Khandola for almost 5 years, and that has given me a ladder to climb up to GIM. And I was invited, and that's what Government College has given to this GIM. And not only me, there are other people also who have joined from the government fraternity into the faculty of GIM. Coming back to the new education policy, if I want to summarize this entire education policy, I have read that, I was not knowing that there is 53-page document, but I have read that original document of 488, and it has given me an insight into that. And after reading, sir was very kind to send me that 53-page document also. And I have read many critics which have been there in the newspaper and Friendswood, and I should be thankful to Mansi Kamath, Dr. Mansi Kamath. She has written one article, and that has given me a lot of points. So thanks to Professor Mansi for her article. If I have to summarize those all 488 pages, and I'll summarize them to just 4 statements or 4 words. It says, think big, innovate big, be big, and grow big. So these are the 4 things. I repeat, think big, innovate big, be big, and grow big. So if I have to summarize the entire policy, these are the 4 things which comes out of those policy. And I have been told to talk on the higher education over there. Some of the silent features which I have read through this higher education and original document, it is a new structure, totally a new structure. It's a very innovative structure, and because it's a new structure, innovative structure, a lot of challenges are there, a lot of bottlenecks also will be there. The second one is it's very progressive. You can check over there. Of course, I'll talk to that little later, but it's a progressive in a sense that the teacher is free to design his course outline, and students is free to design his course. The best thing that can happen, of course, this is what should expect if the big people are there, which are not, in quotes, not politically motivated. This is what comes out. The students can design their own course, what we call as choice-based, we call it as career-based course, or they call it career-based course for this. The next one is, it's very dynamic system. So it's not that we have to wait for 10 years to think, and then blockchain will come when blockchain technology is outdated. Bitcoins are outdated and now it comes into the syllabus. This is not going to happen. The system at least what they are proposed is very dynamic. It will change as and when market changes, as and when the society changes, as and when technology changes. Right? That is the dynamism which is there. One more thing which is there is it's plug and play. Everywhere now everywhere it comes like it's no longer that I will install the drive and then that particular device will work on my machine and so forth. No. This education policy also is a plug and play. So any person, any student who comes into the higher education can get himself or herself motivated, tuned, installed and compatible with the education that she or he wants. That's what I call as plug and play. And last, which is a tagline which always comes repeatedly in this document, is light but not light and tight. That is what they have said. So these are the 5 or 6 silent features of this education policy. If I want to see what are the advantages of this education policy, the first one is it's a new way of thinking. Everything is new, and that's why when something new comes, we do not know how to eat it. Whether we should eat it with hands, whether we should cut with knife, and which hand I should hold the knife, which hand I should hold the fork. All those things comes, and when because of this, it's a new thing, new structure. We might have some hiccups. The second one is control. At one hand, there is a lot of control on this education system, not from the political dynamism, but from the stakeholders. So there is a lot of control over there. So that it's the educationalist, at the same time the receivers, both are being controlled by the very dynamic nature of the system. The next one is innovation and creativity. As I said, because it's a progressive, because it's dynamic, I have to always talk about, I have to always change. I was always on the toes. That should happen. And Professor Seema was talking that disruptive technologies. And at least I was there for 5 minutes, and that time she has uttered this disruptive technology at least 20 times. So that tells how innovativeness should have been there in this system. The third point. The fourth one is it is only for the serious people, because they have diversified that. If you look at the structure, they have said it is 3-year degree and 4-year degree and so on and so forth. Right? So there is the seriousness into the educational system. Those people who cannot cope up with that, they should not lose their heart. At the same time, they can excel in there. And I always believe it's not that sometimes we fail. It's not because we are incapable, because there is some small stone somewhere and the water is not flowing. As time passes, either stone shrinks or my power becomes stronger, I become more mature, and that stone is washed out. And at the age of 3rd year, if I think I have got a potential and I have to diversify, I can do that. Right? That is serious. The next one is, as I mentioned, it has got a direct link with market and the industry. This is one of the best things that can happen. I am not saying that the education is different from what industry expect. We talk more about the philosophy. Someone was talking to me and he said that, see, the students do not know how to program in C++. And industry wants C++ and they do not know how to write programs in C++. I told them, please, tomorrow industry will ask for Java, so we should change to Java. And I said, ask 10 industries. One industry will say, I want VB. Second will say, I want C#, I want C++, and so on and so forth. So do you think that we should talk about that? I said, industry wants the coder, and we are developing the programmers, we are developing the algorithm developers, right, which is more easier for any industry to pick up, any person to pick up. To support my view, I said, you take engineers, any engineers you take, whether it is BE, electronics, civil, what they do after 5 years. Every person joins IT industry and they become a coder over there. That means if that is the coding can be taught within 6 months, so coding should not become the part of the education in this one. And this is what going to happen in the new policy. We are going to bring out the people which is a mix of both, and that's why the graduation has become from 3 years to 4 years. Of course, it's not that 3 years to 4 years in true sense, but some people can do 3 years, some people can do 4 years, right? Next one, which is extremely this one, which is not mentioned in the new 53-page document, but it was there in this one. It is self-corrective. The system is very, very self-corrective. So if something is not working fine, teacher or students can go for the correction for that. As Sima ma'am was talking about the technology, lots of technology is involved in this. Lots and lots. I can say some of the innovativeness which is there, disruptive technologies, then AI, then big data analytics, then BI, those terms, those technologies will come not in the front seat, but they will be at the back end and will be supporting this new higher education thing. So let me go for the last thing which I read and which I assimilated, which I would like. So some of the challenges that have been faced. The first one is the capacity building. It's a huge task, huge task. Of course, I'm happy that they are talking about 2035 and 2040. So we have got a lot of time to gradually progress to that. And I'm also happy that they are not going for big bang approach, rather than that they are going for the piecemeal approach. Very good strategy by those 5 people who have drafted this policy. Next one is social issues. Right? There are a lot of social issues, cultural issues will be there. Financial issues are very big. They have said 20,000 crores earmark budgeted for this new NEP 2020, which is just 0.1% of GDP. As per me, this is a peanut. Okay? And they need, I do not know, multiply by 10 or multiply by 100. That's what should invest at least initially 5 years, so that if this system can sustain. The next one is technological issues. One such technology which will be useful, and they are not talking at all in this, is MOOC, MOOC. Right? So MOOC should have been, they must have talked more about MOOC in this policy, which this one. Training and preparing issues are there. I'm not talking about the training of the students, I'm talking about training of the parents, and moreover, training of the teacher. And this is where also I beg to differ. If I look at I have not counted, but teacher word comes more time than the learning centric. So I would have preferred if this policy was learner centric rather than the teachers. I would have been more happy, but it's a chemistry which will, if it is teacher centric, it will all basically become a learner centric thing. Last one is evolution issues. So I want it's not to be a big bang, it should gradually evolve. So whenever gradually evolves, the failures are small, and if the failures are big, then the entire system crumbles to the dust. So which I don't want, because the policy is good, which is there. And the last point, which is very, very important, is that they are planning to get GER to 50% by 2035. Okay, it's a good symbol. So GER going to 50% by 2035 is a good symbol. And if they seriously, I'm sincere back to all the political parties, let's not make this one as a political issue, or it should not happen that whatever the previous government done, I will start with a zero when my government comes to the power. So it should not happen. It's a good policy. There are a lot of hiccups, there are a lot of challenges, and we should progress with a positive mindset to this. Any new system will face challenges, will face hiccups, will face turbulence, all things that is going to happen. But at the heart to heart, I can say, yes, this is what India is looking for the years. I congratulate Professor Kasturirangan for giving us this nice document, and very much thankful for all of them. And that's what I would like to sit my mind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor. You have flagged a few issues. As expected, Professor Sutankar, he has been very precise in how he sees the whole issue of the new education policy. Started with think big, innovate big, be big and grow big, and then went on to look at issues which need a very closer look. We have had the viewpoint of an educationist, and that too somebody who is in an institution which looks at churning out professional graduates in management. Let us go over to yet another viewpoint, a viewpoint from the industry, a viewpoint of the fourth estate, of how they look at the new economic policy, what are the issues that they feel are crucial for the new education policy. Over to Mr. Anand Salkar, Assistant Editor, Lokmat.
So thanks for this opportunity. I would rather present a ringside view of a layman's take on this new educational policy 2020. Let me begin with saying that I would go with the general perception that it's a visionary document, out of box ideas. But then tell me, which policy documents isn't visionary, at least in its introductory stage? They all are. The crux lies in the implementation of each policy. As a bystander, as a journalist for 26 years, watching unfolding of several government policies and taking them to their logical conclusion, what I feel is that the proof of pudding lies in the eating. It's the implementation that matters, and I would keep my fingers crossed to offer any opinion as to the efficacy of this new document. See, we had a right to education in 2009, and it suggested that there was no failure policy. You are supposed to ensure that every student goes over to standard 9th without failing in any class. The intent was that those whose comprehension abilities were lagging would be retutored or reoriented so that they pass the threshold. What has happened in reality is that they are just pushed, either with the tools like internal assessment, or their mark sheets are being tweaked and they are pushed. So what we have at present is a serious backlog at standard 9. Luckily this year COVID prevailed and all are pushed into standard 10th, and I think we are staring in the face for a major failure, major retainment at the board exams. So the crux is in the implementation of it. Having said that, I would acknowledge that the new document is visionary in the sense that it speaks about early interventions in early childhood education, literacy and numeracy, foundational literacy and numeracy. Again, the pedagogical as well as the curricular structures at school level. A total overhauling of the teachers' educational systems, and more importantly, the building a robust architecture for the higher education. Having said that, there are some areas for concern for a layman like me. I think that the document pays just a lip service to the right to education 2009. Mind you, when this right to education was implemented, the responsibility of imparting free and universal education to the age group between 6 and 14 rested with the state governments. And they had their own results. If I go by the UNICEF figures, in 2009, we had something like 14 million students out of the school system. By 2014, we had 6 million. There were the results. But at the same time, if you go by the HRD ministry figures, at present we have just 18% of schools in our country adhering completely to right to education. There are issues from infrastructural facilities to poor or unfair teacher-student ratio. The document as such pays lip service to right to education, saying that such a framework exists, not dealing with the failures or the pitfalls that are visible, very much visible over there. At the same time, we should also know that 65% is the share of public schools in the entire curricular structure of our country. It is sad to note that the public funding is reducing day by day. On the contrary, if you go at the northern part of our country, you will find that there is a mushrooming of private schools charging very less fees. One would say that this is a welcome initiative, less fees. Some schools, I am told that they charge just 500 rupees per pupil per month. But then it is at the cost of facilities as well as trained teachers. So ultimately, the quality is the casualty. So my question that usually props up is, are we going for a rapid privatization of the entire system? Another issue that I would like to highlight in this is pays another lip service to the idea of social justice as enshrined in our constitution. You would all know that our constitution has mandated 3 categories of socially deprived, disadvantageous sections: SC, ST, and OBC. And it suggests that there should be a robust mechanism for catering to the upliftment of these sections and get social justice. Certainly, the new educational policy pays a lip service to this, because it says that there should be a mechanism for addressing the grievances of the needs of the socio-economically disadvantageous stage group. It describes it as a socio-economically disadvantaged group, and it suggests construction or building of a special educational zones for this. Now, my grievance is that when you say you are building a special educational zone for this group, you don't take into consideration the strength of this group. If you consider the SC, ST, and OBC population in our country, and then you add to it other weaker sections like the women, the minorities, the physically disabled, then you arrive at a whopping percentage of 80. It comes to 80%. You are providing a special educational zone for this, and for the rest 20 who are already privileged, you are leaving the well-oiled, well-established educational system for the rest 20 of them. Is this justified? Again, when you relegate this whopping section of 80% to the so-called socio-economically disadvantaged group, you are tweaking with the constitutionally mandated definition of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and thereby you are providing a leeway to the existing system to ignore its responsibilities towards these less privileged sections. My third concern is that with all this rebuilding and realignment of institutions like NCERT and what we have learned in the previous discourses, are we going for a centralized funding where fundings, accreditation, everything will be centrally decided? In that case, whereas the education remains a state subject and the milk cow being taken away from the states, what would be the state's role? Will it be a mute implementator? Will the interest persist at the state level? I think the Parliament would have to deliberate on these nuances. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Yet another view which looks in a very critical manner at certain issues, things unfinished, tasks unfinished, and we assume that these tasks are already over and we want to build up on that. As it would be representing, as I said, the fourth estate, it was but natural that Mr. Salkar would have this view of this, but certainly a food for thought for us. Yet another important stakeholder in this whole process are those institutions which are in the mid path of the schooling at the lower level and the pursuing of education at the higher level. We have Principal Sinari here. Let us see what he has to say about the new education policy. More particularly, Mr. Sinari, how would that affect the higher secondary? 10 plus 2 is gone out and it has given away to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Plus 2, how does it take care of the higher secondary level, which is such a crucial factor between the schooling at the school level and the transition to higher education?
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected Principal Mendes. It's a nice opportunity for me to come over here after so many years to discuss about national education policy, which will come into play after a long period of 34 years if it is implemented very soon, and if more years to come to implement it, because as Sarkar sir has said, the crucial problem lies with the policy is implementation. First of all, let me tell you that I welcome this policy, though there are some points which may be critically evaluated. As a document, the old document also was a very good one and new also, because every document should be conducive to the situations of that particular time period. That policy which was there earlier was conducive to that period, and now the new one is conducive to today's problems, challenges and opportunities. I have not made detailed study of this. Actually, I was not aware exactly about the program. The intermediary who told me that, he said that you will have to speak for 5 minutes, give your opinion and come back. Anyhow, I got opportunity to represent principals of higher secondary school, where this setup which has been changed, that last 4 years, I don't know exactly whether 4 years we will be there or those 4 years will be clubbed with schools. Exactly, we don't know, because we have been discussing principals of higher secondary school about the same issue which you have asked me just now. What will happen? Because these 11th and 12th standards will be merged with schools, or 9th and 10th standard will be merged with higher secondaries. Because then there are other questions in the heads of principals, that if suppose both these are merged, there will be 2 heads, and who is going to be the superior and another will be inferior. That is also a question running in their mind, because already headmaster is there for school and principal is there for higher secondary school. Now that question need to be solved, I think, at a different level, stage. But coming back to this policy, I would like to speak with regard to Goa's education and how we take up. The most important problem in the success of education and providing right type of people to the industry is failure on part of all the stakeholders to implement it. That's what I think. Sir has just now said, I would like to cite an example over here, that is CCE, Continuous and Comprehensive Evaluation, which was brought up, and it was taken wrongly by us, that what I should say. And then later on parents also started saying, no, now we don't require examination because everybody will be promoted till standard 8 directly. Actually, many of the time I give example from that film Tare Zameen Par, wherein the student who is been given help, additional help to improve upon his studies, It has been shown over there. I have been giving this example for parents for so many years. It is not that directly we have to promote a child and take him into the 9th standard and then there will be a saturation in 9. But that was happening because we took it wrongly. So many of the time we start blaming government. They have introduced this policy. They have asked us to promote all the standard without studying how exactly it has to be done. Here also there are so many things. So as what I have said, the today's learning and teaching, both, most of the time is teacher-centered, is one thing which has to change as per this policy to learner-centered. Learners here will be given their exercise their choice of selecting the subject and all. That is a very good thing. And if at all when student comes to know that okay, I can't do this, then I can shift and go to something else. Now that opportunity will be given to child. This is very important thing. But then institutions of ours must make available learning facilities in that particular subject which a child is asking. Will it be possible for us? That is a main question. Right now also what we do, we say that okay, we are having this subject, so you have to take only this. We don't have this much. So student come, when they fill the form, for example, they may be writing arts student, I want history. I say no, we don't have history teacher, we don't have that facilities and nothing. Even we don't have facilities for CWSM. So we request then parents that you please go to such a school where there will be a facility. We don't have it. So infrastructure and many other questions are there. Just now when I said that implementation on part of everybody is a failure, it is a failure of ours also. So I won't blame government always. As I have read it from newspaper, though I have not studied the entire document properly, I have read through newspapers and all. Mr. Sisodia, Education Minister from Delhi, those people, they say that Delhi, they have made quite big changes in education. And even that political party, they are asking other states to follow their policy. If not in toto, at least good things can be followed or new things can be implemented. But he is speaking about 4 important core areas which I have read. One is vocationalization of education. Another one is improvement of government institutions. Next one was exam evaluation. The current evaluation method is not okay, he says, which is agreed upon by everybody and accepted also, but still we are not ready to change. And next one is rote learning. Many of the time I ask my children also, Baba, why do you study? Or many of the time when we tell students to study, what is our general statement? We say, Are Baba, your exam is approaching, study. We never say, Are Baba, you have to do this work in your future life, therefore you study. We never say it like that. It is a general tendency. Exam is approaching, study. That means student now, teachers now, even we studied because of exams. We never liked or interested to study something which is my passion. I love it. And we never think that, okay, I have to do this particular thing in my life to earn my bread and butter. And that's why I have to study it properly. I teach accountancy. I tell my students, learn accountancy. Today also, in my online class, I have insisted upon them to learn it so that you can write books of accounts and earn something, not that you will be getting a job. So today's scenario of learning, looking at the things is just to get certificates and degrees. That has to change, and this document is saying that it will happen. It has to happen. Now, who is going to do it? That is most important. We have to accept these changes and we have to implement it. We have to implement. Not that from central government orders will come and then you have to do it like this and like that. Many of the time when the curriculum changes, again we say, oh, it has changed. I have prepared for last so many years this thing and now it is changing. So there will be grumbling on part of teachers. So that should not happen. Every time we have to keep on changing, accept the things. Now this policy will help us to learn, if suppose we go by it. Another thing is vocationalization. I would like to blame here, Goa government. We are having vocational streams running over here, but they are not taken that seriously in that way. it is given stepmotherly treatment. Like for example, when a staff is appointed, teacher is appointed, you have to work like part-time teacher for 1,000 or 2,000 for some years, or full part-time for 5 years, and then you will be given a. Now, if a teacher is not satisfied as far as job satisfaction is concerned, as far as his earning is concerned, then he is not going to give entire things. Whereas in the same field, a peon or a clerk who is appointed gets a scale salary from the day one, but a teacher has to work here like this for a laborious labor. Now, this stepmotherly treatment is given in for vocational education, whereas this policy speaks about vocationalization of entire education. And some days back, NSQF, National Skill Qualification Framework, it has come. And they were telling us that, okay, entire vocationalization of education will happen, and a child will be given 10 levels of learning up till PhD. But I think it has stopped after 4th level only. It has not reached 5th and 6th level. I don't know why university has not accepted it. It is a good idea, but when it was not accepted over there, already it has started getting deteriorated at down level also. Now, this policy was supposed to be implemented through government schools, high schools and higher secondary schools. But only because there are only 9 government higher secondary schools, some private higher secondaries were also aided higher secondaries were selected, and course was running. Initially, it was very good, but later on, because of these problems which came into force, it has lost its importance later on. So that vocationalization, which was introduced with that particular intention, that one is getting defeated. Even vocational stream is not been implemented properly in the education system. Whereas vocational education, which is professional education, is quite more important than general education, which sometimes may not be giving us more things, because that vocational education also gives you 1 month on the job training, which is also been insisted in this policy. And it will be given like on the job training or hands-on training will be given as per this policy at a primary level or something, or secondary, I think. Now, it was given here in vocational. My institution, we are serious and we are appointing or deputing our children like in offices for office management children for 1 month. But there are many schools, I don't blame those schools. They tell students, okay, you just get the certificate of on-the-job training from anybody and you'll get the marks. Means everything is been done here for marks and for the sake of climbing the ladder of these standards from one standard to another standard without thinking that I have to acquire this much learning. I cite many of the time examples of other things. About you are learning this particular thing. Why you are learning? Is there an exam of yours that you are going to answer for this particular purpose? The best example which I give is riding of two-wheelers. Children love to ride two-wheelers. Even if they fall down, they learn it. Even if you say no to it, they learn it. But they don't like to learn, they don't like to read. Reading habits have gone down, and that's why these learning things have gone down. Now, another thing which they are that Sisodia talked about is funding of this one. The earlier the policy also stated that the total fund to be allotted in this sector is 6% of GDP. And this one is also talking about the same. But will it happen or not? That is a question mark. So, even government schools. Now here in Goa, I think there are more number of government schools than aided schools as far as schools. And in case of higher secondaries, it is vice versa. And also in case of colleges. But if suppose government schools are strengthened, like the one they say that in Delhi they have done, then it will be a great success, because as sir has also said, the creamy layer don't prefer to come to government schools. And if suppose we want to really develop or improve upon the education scenario in the downtrodden and poor areas, then government institutions need to be given full support by all the people. Now, many of the time, even then, this college is having so much good infrastructure. I have noticed even my children not giving preference to this college. I straight away actually tell them about the facilities provided in the school, in this college, whether it is physical facilities or moral support, and all the things are one of the best in Goa. But still, I don't know what attitude they are keeping towards government colleges. That is a question. So regarding this also, actually there has to be something to be done on part of government, that government should do some publicity for government colleges. Many of the time we see government doing publicity for other sectors. On the contrary, no, I don't blame as such a particular government as such, but any government. Because we can best cite example of BSNL also, BSNL and MTNL. So these are the things. Because I have not done that much studies, I won't be able to speak more. But
certainly
major part
given
is
us
already covered by Sir Sri.
very good view of all that. If
Thank
I
you
was to
very
sum up what Principal Sinari has said, he has expressed the first thing that came out was the uncertainty, because the new education policy 2020, although has made these categories of 5+3 +3 +4, has certainly not given a blueprint, and the higher secondary schools certainly do not know which will be clubbed with what, and what would be the administrative pitfalls, what would be the administrative challenges if this happens. The other thing which really comes up well is that he said we have to take up that challenge. It's we who have to implement. The point which Salkar Bab has been raising is that a policy is as good as its implementation. For your knowledge, the last part, the new education policy has 4 parts. The first part deals with school education. The second part deals with the higher education. The third part deals with other key areas which have its impact on education per se. And the fourth part, this is a welcome sign that has happened, is making it happen. And the second part, sub-part of making it happen is how well to implement this. With that, sharing, just summing up what Mr. Sinari has said, I was telling you an important component, the most important rather, for a whole education system are the students. And with us today we have Ms. Chauhan, who will be speaking in Hindi and speaking out her mind of what she feels. We have a good representative, because when we talk about socially disadvantaged groups, rural areas, people who have entered the portals of higher education for the first time, first generation learners, this is what fully is represented by Ms. Chauhan. And certainly we would be looking forward to hear your views about what is the new education policy vis-a-vis the student community.
नमस्कार। मंच पर उपस्थित हमारे महाविद्यालय के प्राध्यापक आदरणीय प्रोफेसर जरवासियो मेंडिस जी, सभागृह में उपस्थित हमारे उप प्राचार्य अनिल करमपरकर जी, मेरे शिक्षकगण और मंच पर उपस्थित अन्य वक्ताओं को मेरा सादर प्रणाम। मेरा नाम प्रियंका चौहान है और मैंने इसी महाविद्यालय से मेरी स्नातक की पढ़ाई पूरी की है और अभी मैं हिंदी स्नातकोत्तर के 2य वर्ष में पढ़ रही हूँ। विद्यार्थियों को मद्देनज़र में रखते हुए मैं नई शिक्षा नीति के बारे में मेरा जो मत है, मतलब छात्रों को इस नीति के माध्यम से क्या लाभ होंगे उसके बारे में मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगी। नई शिक्षा नीति 2020 ने जो पहला बदलाव किया है वो है शैक्षणिक ढांचे में बदलाव। मतलब वर्तमान की 10+2 की जो स्कूली व्यवस्था है उसे अब 5+3+3+4 इस नई स्कूली व्यवस्था में बदला जाएगा। ये बदलाव मुझे इसलिए अच्छा लगा कि जैसे जैसे उम्र बढ़ती जाती है वैसे ही विद्यार्थियों की समझने की जो क्षमता होती है उसका विकास होता जाता है। तो 3 से 18 साल की उम्र तक हर पड़ाव पर उनके विकास के लिए क्या क्या ज़रूरी है उस पर इसमें ध्यान दिया जाएगा। अगली महत्वपूर्ण बात यह है जो मुझे अच्छी लगी, वो है प्रिपरेटरी स्टेज, यानी कि 5वीं कक्षा तक मातृभाषा या स्थानीय भाषा में पढ़ाया जाएगा। हम देखते हैं कि जब भाषा अपनी होती है, छात्र जब भाषा से परिचित होते हैं तो वो अच्छी तरह से समझ पाते हैं। अगर भाषा ही परिचित नहीं होगी तो बच्चों को रटने की आदत लग जाती है। बच्चे रटने लगते हैं, समझने की बजाय रटकर परीक्षाएं देने जाते हैं। तो उनका उद्देश्य ये है कि जो बच्चों की रटने की आदत है वो वो बंद हो जाए। फिर है 6ठी कक्षा और 8वीं कक्षा के बच्चों को कंप्यूटर का ज्ञान मिलेगा, जिससे बच्चे छोटी उम्र में ही सॉफ्टवेयर और मोबाइल एप्लीकेशंस को बनाने की जो प्रक्रिया होती है उसे समझेंगे। इसका फ़ायदा ये होगा कि उनके सामने बहुत सारे विकल्प होंगे जिनमें वे अपना भविष्य बना सकते हैं। पहले क्या होता था, कोई छात्र अगर पढ़ाई में अच्छा नहीं है तो उसे बेकार माना जाता था, उसका भविष्य नहीं है ऐसा लोग कहते थे। लेकिन अब 6ठी कक्षा के ऊपर के जो छात्र हैं उन्हें पढ़ाई के साथ साथ अन्य कलाओं का भी ज्ञान दिया जाएगा, जिसके माध्यम से वो आगे बढ़कर भविष्य में कुछ कर सकता है। फिर है बच्चों को विषयों को चुनने का मौका मिलेगा, जिससे अगर कोई बच्चा है वो साहित्य में अगर रुचि रखता है और उसके माता पिता अगर उसे विज्ञान ही लेने पर जोर देते हैं, उसे मजबूर करते हैं साइंस लेने में, तो वह बच्चा अपनी इच्छा पूरी कर पाएगा। साइंस पढ़ते पढ़ते इतिहास या फिर जो भी साहित्य है वो पढ़ पाएगा। फिर 6ठी कक्षा के बाद इंटर्नशिप का भी मौका बच्चों को दिया जाएगा। अगर कोई बच्चा पढ़ाई में अच्छा नहीं है मगर वो किसी कला में रुचि रखता है, जैसे कि कुम्हार की कला होती है, बढ़ई होता है, ऐसी जो कलाएं होती हैं उसमें अगर उसे रुचि है तो वो वहाँ जाकर वो शिक्षा ले सकता है। फिर हमारी जो संस्कृति है उसे पढ़ने का हमें मौका मिलेगा, जैसे कि भारत की विभिन्न भाषाएं हैं, उनके माध्यम से हम विभिन्न संस्कृतियों को समझ पाएंगे। इस नीति की एक बात मुझे बहुत अच्छी लगी, वो है सिर्फ पाठ्यक्रम पे वो जोर नहीं देंगे, उसके साथ ही साथ अन्य कलाओं पर, अन्य कलाएं, शिष्टाचार, जो मानवीय मूल्य होते हैं वो बच्चों को पढ़ाए जाएंगे, जो उनके जीवन में कभी भी बेकार नहीं जाएगा। फिर ऑनलाइन और ऑफलाइन क्लासेस के विकल्प बच्चों के सामने होंगे। जब बच्चा एक कक्षा में पढ़ता है तो वो शिक्षक उस कक्षा तक ही सीमित रहता है, लेकिन जब उसके पास ऑनलाइन या फिर डिजिटल चीज़ों से वो पढ़ता है तो बहुत कुछ पा सकता है, हासिल कर सकता है। इस नीति का उद्देश्य सिर्फ उत्तीर्ण होना या फिर बच्चे क्या करते हैं, सिर्फ परीक्षा है इसलिए पढ़ते हैं, तो ये उसका उद्देश्य नहीं है। उन्हें ज्ञान हासिल करना उनका मूल उद्देश्य है। मैंने अपनी जानकारी के अनुसार मेरा मत आपके सामने प्रस्तुत किया है। मुझे यहाँ पर बोलने का मौका मिला, इसलिए मैं तहे दिल से आपकी आभारी हूँ। और एक चीज़, कोई भी चीज़ अगर हमें शुरू करनी है तो उसमें थोड़ी बहुत कठिनाइयाँ तो आती ही रहती है, लेकिन हमें बदलाव चाहिए, हमें और भी आगे बढ़ना है। इसलिए मैं आशा करती हूँ कि इस नीति के माध्यम से हमारी आने वाली पीढ़ी और उसके माध्यम से हमारे देश की बहुत बहुत उन्नति हो। यह कहकर मैं अपनी वाणी को विराम देती हूँ। साधुवाद।
Thank you. The claps speak volume of one of our own students having such lucid thoughts about. Let me sum up, because that is the crucial thing. She, at the first instant, welcomes the new change of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, and then talks about the vocationalizers of education. She welcomes the choice that is now available. What Mr. Sinari has been saying, that yes, we offer choices which we have with us, not the choices which the student want. He was giving an example of history. We don't have history in our higher secondary. Please go and take admission somewhere else. And the situation is no different in the collegiate setup. Although we have implemented the choice-based credit system. The choice-based credit system is based on the choices that we offer rather than the choices that the students wants to offer. And I think she has hit the nail by saying that we welcome this change because students would love to have a choice that would allow them to experience experiential learning, which Professor Seema has been talking in her presentation. Experiential learning, I would like to get into, if I'm a science student, I would like to get into art. Another crucial point that she has raised is that this watertight compartment, the day it goes, it will also put less pressure on the students, the parental pressure that comes with you only have to take science. Unfortunately, we have these cutoffs that for science, this is the cutoff. For the next cutoff is for commerce, the next cutoff is for arts, and those who don't get anything else go for vocational. And that was a point which was bemoaned by the principal because he knows firsthand of what is happening. A child doesn't go for vocational, and we have right from that time onwards, we have given, to quote the principal here, stepmotherly treatment to vocational stream, and then that it happens even as far as payment is concerned. The irony of the situation is that the teacher gets paid less than the clerical staff, and that's the irony of our vocational stream. The other point that she has talked about is the recognition and the appreciation of our culture and the introduction of the digital mode of transaction of delivery of our teaching and learning processes. Let us accept the fact that we are digital aliens. Many of us who are teachers, who have put in 20 plus years, we are digital aliens. They are digital natives. And that's a divide. I would like to take this from here. 6 to 14 years of mandatory schooling expanded to 3 to 18. Previously, we used to start with 6 to 18. Now we are starting it from 3 to 18. So, catch them young, mold them, because they say by 6 years, the child's mental capacities have already formed. 3 years early start. What are your views, Mr. Salkar? As a parent, as a citizen, what is this change going to be? We start 3 years early. May I request you to keep your mics in your hand so that I will fire a question to any one of you. Yeah.
Hello. Well, on that aspect, I refuse to accept the fact that age 3 of a child is the age for learning. Not with the present understanding of what is learning. With the present system, a child need not be introduced at that early age to the learning. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's one view. Principal Sinari, if I could ask you, this getting in the child into early childhood care and education. One view is that a child should not be introduced at that stage. What do you feel?
For example, I would give, here in Goa, we learn 4 languages. And many of the time we say that we are not good at even one of them. Means,
okay.
Yeah. So, jack of all trade and chap of none. Now, if suppose a standard 1 child, even who is age of 5 years, let's take, if you tell him that, Baba, this is a Marathi language, this is something Hindi, this is something, even Portuguese words are over here in Goa. How far they are going to understand that there are so many different languages? Asa. Are they going to understand? No. What they learn is whatever that is spoken in home, mother, that they learn. And even if suppose they watch television and other things, they learn that language also. Because I have observed this, son of my brother, he speaks very good Hindi, though we are not speaking. Yes, he is on television all the time. This one and
Just
watches.
the mic a
yeah.
little closer.
So,
My question.
that early childhood learning, as far as the way we say that you have to learn this, write this, and all, no. I think this document says that it has to be learned through poems and songs and other play-like games. Then it is okay. But there should not be hard and fast something that this has to be our syllabus. You have to cover this. You have to learn this lesson. You have to write all these things.
Okay.
No.
No regimental learning. There is one view which says a child has full freedom to enjoy his or her childhood. The other view is that if at all it is coming and if it's a given, then have it in a form which will be enjoyable, which the child will relish. Professor Suptankar had to say something.
Yeah, I do agree with Mr. Sarkar and principal. This is my philosophy of the early education. I always say that if you want to kill someone's innovation, give him the formal education and the rest is assured. Over here, when we send these kids to the schools, some of the things that we are going to lose. First thing is that child grows emotionally very strong when he or she is with his mother, when he is his parent. So this is what we are going to lose out. So emotional quotient is going to be zero in the child. Second thing is that his intellectual, his innovation, his creativity will be killed by a teacher because she or he knows that, okay, this is the right way of thinking. I'm of the strong opinion, there is a one term which has been quite oftenly used, which I always debate and I always constrain for that. They say slow learners. I say there is no one called as slow learners. Its only thing is that we are not able to teach them the way they want to learn it. Our teaching style and their learning style is a mismatch, and that's why for us to be on comfort zone, we say he is a slow learner, so it's not mine. So it's passing the ball from my court to his court and say you now play because you are a slow learner. Right? So this is what I am very against this tree. So let him be at home, and of course the parents wants to send him at school because both the parents are working. So if the school is from 8 o'clock to 7 o'clock, most of the parents will be happy. Because, yes. Then second thing that is going to happen is when the students, and this is what I have seen, and I have to say this, the first, second standard he goes to the play school and mother or father asks, what is the syllabus and which are the books? When he cannot, see there are so many other things about when we say child development that should be there. And first one is his physical activity, neurals, his independent thinking and his independent expression, so which is going to be a big loss for this, and we are going to produce robots and not human beings.
Professor Suptankar has touched an emotional chord when he talks about emotional quotient. He feels, as Mr. Sarkar feels, that that bonding that happens, especially with the mother, and why not the father as well, with the parents, and more importantly the mother, has to be given its due importance. Yet another important issue that comes through all this is the second point which our student representative has spoken. She talked about the mother tongue, and I would like to push this a little further. If a child speaks in mother tongue, imagine a big state which has got so many variants. Look at Goa. In Betul they say "Aun khayoita." Somewhere in Madgaon it will be little different. And Pedna Pautokos "Aun khayoita." Even a small state like Goa, we have different variants of spoken. So, which is that official that we are going to adopt? I would request, being a linguist, if Professor Sonia could throw light on this, and then I would request Mr. Sarkar to come on this. The variance in that, in fact, in one of the articles that was written by one of the professors from CAPE, she has clearly pointed out this vagueness that will come in. I'll tell you, because I am from Sashti. For me, the written Konkani is as alien as any other person from Karnataka or Maharashtra.
Thank you, sir. As Priyanka has rightly pointed out, first I'll take up what sir has, the issue which sir has raised. If you take Konkani language, you can call it a state language or a mother tongue, or you can call it a home language. This language has got lot of variations. As sir has rightly pointed out, Perne if you go, it's something different. Sashti if you go, it's something different. And Picholi and Sankali, it is something different. These variations are inculcated by the child right from the childhood in him. And I suppose, and now I would like to join the question with Priyanka's viewpoint, that what Priyanka pointed out was like this. She said, if the child is allowed to learn in his childhood, in his mother tongue, it would be better because he will then not have to mug up the things. So the habit of mugging up starts right from the childhood. And why he does it? Because he's being given he's being taught in alien language. So if he's taught in the mother tongue or the regional language which he speaks at home, with whatever variations that are there, I think he will be trying to understand in his own mother tongue, learn it and learn it for the lifelong. He will never mug it up, he will never do it for the sake of examination, as Sir Sinari has rightly pointed out. So that mugging up habit, or just for the sake of, let me learn just for the sake of examination, that habit the child will never develop in him.
How does one take care of the variations?
Sir.
How does one take care of the variations? So do we have a standardized language?
Okay, yes. Like Konkani, if you go to see, now it is almost in the line of those 24 languages which are there in India, which has got recognition. Now it is standardized. The Konkani language has got the standard form. It has grammar of its own, and these variations, okay, they are there. If you go to see, sir, we have variations in Marathi as well. Malwani, Kolhapuri,
Okay.
and like in Hindi also. If you go to Hindi
But
belt,
the
Rajasthan,
one which is adopted at the formal level is the one which is in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that's what is being accepted by the writers in the books. I mean,
Fine.
that's what we get to see in writing as well. That seems to be a little difficult because we don't talk that language, speak that language at home. Tanka hame kire सांगितले खबर आसा तुमका? This is how we write. But आम्ही उलयता आसतना ताका हांवें कितें सांगिल्लें खबर आसा तुका? This is how we talk. But that's okay. That way, even if you go to see any language for that matter,
So
sir,
it is not as alien as we think it to be.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Salkar, what do you have to say on this?
See, I think this has two components. One is that they might have in view the concept of neighborhood schools, where the student doesn't travel much.
Okay.
It attends a school in its neighborhood.
Okay.
The teachers are from the vicinity. So, while imparting the education, the linguistic barriers, the variants doesn't
Okay.
impact
Doesn't impact much.
But then, if we consider the learning age of the student starts from a very tender age, and it comprehends very quickly, I don't think the language needs to be a barrier. The policy doesn't take into consideration the component of floating population, the migration.
Okay.
So if outsider, and that's a very sizable population, the recent pandemic has shown us.
Yes.
It's a sizable population. It doesn't cater to that. So we need not stick to that. I myself am a proponent of mother tongue, imparting education in mother tongue, at least at the primary levels. But then we don't have to be rigid. As far as the language is concerned, we are living literally in a global village, and we have to cater to its needs.
The three language formula, I think, is something which will bid well for our students, because we want to increase their language proficiencies in at least three languages. One point of that same school education that when two of our panelists have expressed very strong reservations as far as starting early is concerned. Let me give you an example. A couple of parents whom I have met, especially when they were sent, they did not even have any inkling of what formal education was all about. What is this so-called cut-off and passing and failing? And in fact, they have expressed that whenever a child has come with a calendar with 2-3 reds, the child was very happy because the child has seen a color which is red, and he said, all others are not having any color, my report card has a color. That shows the innocence, and whether we should impinge upon that innocence at that stage to formalize education. But since it is a given, maybe we could look at how enjoyable education could be. The Delhi model is there for all of us to see of how happiness quotient could be then pushed in education. Friends, I move on to yet another important aspect, and that aspect is capacity building that you have said. Mr. Salkar has talked about, are we opening the stables for takeover by the private sector, and which is waiting in the wings to come and take over, where the importance of the public sector in higher education will become minimal. In fact, in the last masterclass series where JBJ Tilak had come, he had expressed his concern that over a period of time, the public sector is withdrawing. In the state of Goa, it may be increasing, but overall, all India average, the public sector has been withdrawing, the private sector has been taken over. 1968, 1986, we have still been talking about 6% of the GDP. In fact, Seema and I have done our PhD through an institute where the frontal area of research has been economics of education. I would request Professor Seema to throw light on why this has not happened. And now when we are still talking about 1968, 1986, it did not happen. Now we are talking about in 2020 that at least 6% it should go. What do you have to say? Is it possible? Is it not possible? Will it remain a pipe dream for all of us?
Thank you, sir. Actually, I'm in favor of public funded education system. If at all we have to have access to quality education, government funding is a must. And I think even this NEP is stressing on public support of education. But private sector, even if we are allowing the private sector, it has to be supported by the government, because it affects different aspects. Like if teachers are not paid properly, that also is one of the aspects which we find which is not seen here. But professional institutions, they are not actually paid as per the skills. They may have the designation, but they will not have the salary. So without having satisfied teachers, how we can have a good quality education? This is one social aspect we have to consider. Now you are asking about 6%. Actually what happens is, when the budget is allocated, usually there is a prioritization, and social sector is given the least preference, because they consider over the years it is considered as the least preferred area, because there will be competing other areas where we have infrastructure, especially building of infrastructure or infrastructure and all. Even health sector requires huge amount of funding, because we require healthcare as well as education proper, so that human development will be possible. Now it's not possible because of the reason that
the priorities.
Priority is. But now if they are planning to go for actually devoting, now right now the tax is imposed, the cess is imposed, which is going to be directed towards education and health. So similar type of provision, if it is going to be done, where earmarking of a percentage of tax exclusively for education, then definitely it will be possible.
Okay. So this is a wish list. As Professor Seema has rightly pointed out, the issue is when the budgeting happens, whether it's a state level or at the central level, education being a concurrent subject, education gets the least important. Now, the things are obvious. When you talk about priorities, if I am at the helm of affairs at the government of the day, I would like to see something that can be quantifiable. That's something that can be seen as very obvious. So if I put up a bridge, if I put up a building, it is it's very obvious, so that in the next manifesto I can say I have done this. The education gives you silent returns. Education gives you slow returns. Is this the reason, plausible reasons that it doesn't get prioritized? Now, if that be so, what can the society do? Now, when we say it has not happened in 1968, it has not happened in 1986. If it has happened, it has to happen in 2020. What can the fourth estate do? How can it build that pressure to ensure that at least 6%, if not more, is spent on education? Mr. Salkar.
So the irony is that the funding rests with is in the political domain. That's the main problem with this. What you have just said your prerogatives would be, it's as an academic, and sadly academics doesn't make it to the seats of power in our country. That's the irony of it. I would suggest a total overhaul of our political system itself. Because what we are doing at present, we are keen, our government is keen on doling out rations every month to families. It's not keen on spending that 6% of GDP. It's a paltry sum actually.
Which is actually a paltry sum.
Obviously, it's not a populist decision. If we need to change the mindset of the entire political system, we need to change the mindset of the society itself, which is a big task, I would say. But ultimately, it needs to happen because we are at present playing with our manpower, the manpower of present and the manpower of future. And I don't think this should be let to continue. My appeal would be to the teaching fraternity gathered over here. You may have to spare some time, you will have to spare some time to educating your students about the lacuna and pitfalls of the present system and guide them to be a better citizens as far as their decision making.
Could the students be a strong lobby to ensure by writing, by convincing the government through whichever means that they will that will work, to convince the government to upgrade this outlay for of expenditure for education?
So the problem is that at least in Goan society, I am a journalist, as I said, for 24 years. I see very few people writing and expressing their opinion. This isn't happening in a progressive state like ours. This should happen. Sadly, it's not happening. Even as this new educational policy, there was only one teacher from KPM, Dr. Sushila Mendis, who had the guts to challenge the findings. None other came forward. That's the tragedy.
So takeaway for you is to ensure that if you can influence the student community, Priyanka, to write, लिखना है कि इतना इतना पैसा एजुकेशन में आना ही चाहिए. अभी उन्होंने 6% कहा है कि 6% of GDP has to come in the education sector. So इसलिए वो प्रेशर बिल्डअप होना चाहिए at the national level as well as at the state level. So that is a challenge, I think, for them to pick up. Now, when we talk about, you see, in finances, they talked about 100 top institutions to be invited. Welcome sign. Yesterday, we were very upbeat about it. Some of the institutions had already implemented it long back. What they are saying to do is, if India can have campuses abroad, or the 100 best institutions in the country can come and set up shop here. A large number of thinkers have expressed whether those people will really come if we are just keeping it for the top 100, considering the red tapeism, the bureaucracy that one would have to encounter when they have to come here. What is your view, Professor Suktankar?
Right. Just one correction that I would like to do. We always say spending on education. Okay, so when we say spending on education, we come to the next stage, saving. Like when we say spend, saving comes. Right? And when saving comes, I'll give a concrete example. CBT, that is what? Contact-based teachers. This is a new idea, which is the worst thing to happen to education. This kills the education. Okay. Second one, lecture-based teachers comes into picture, and this kills part-time, single part-time.
Single
I don't know
part-time.
how many terms comes, and this all comes because that spending comes into picture, then saving comes into picture. Rather than that, the government should say, I'm investing in the education, and just see how the things will happen. So if the prerogative goes from spending to investment, the things will happen. I can give you, getting the good people from the abroad is not a big thing. And we are doing at GIM, and it comes very cheap. They say that we are coming to India for the vacations, and their vacation and our working coincide. So it's a very good sign. So we can, and many people who have been alumni of us, they said, give us the local. That means from Bombay, they can fly and give us the local hospitality, more than enough. So we can get it very, very cheaply. Many Goans, if I'm talking about the Goa, many Goans are doing well in abroad, in overseas. In fact, I'm very proud that one of the Goan, Mr. Teli, his father was the Inspector Teli's son. He was a GIM student. He has become
He
the
is IAS officer.
IAS officer.
In
And he is
Rajasthan.
working for Rajasthan, and he is one of the best educational secretaries so far in the country. Why can't we get him back in Goa, or why can't we invite him to talk what we should do in Goa for that? If he is doing wonders for a state like Rajasthan, when 80% of this is worse than what Goa has seen, right? So this is my viewpoint over there. Getting foreign teachers, I'll tell you, some of your teachers were invited to my wife's school in Mollem. Dr. Chindalkar, Professor Anil, and one more from the physics, I can't recollect his name. But then still students say, teacher, trust le teacher amka hard. If we have those type of teachers in Goa, why we need wants to go to MITs and Harvard? Let's give the chance, let them express themselves. And in fact, when she says that what you are teaching, Vaibhav, of course, I'm sorry, Professor Vaibhav is much better than you. The way, in a way, he has taught me dissection. So far, nobody has taught me. We have the local talent. Professor Anil, when he went, he touched each person. In fact, Professor Ramla Wag also came over there. He said, when he talked, he said that, teacher, tane sagle amche kajanche olele. See, when this emotional quotient, I'm again and again taking this emotional quotient out. When we have the local talent, why we want this Star Wars? It's not that we should not. I will not say we should not. They have got, I respect them. I would also like to listen to them, and so on and so forth. And it's not a big financial budget. It's only the willpower if government have, if we have. And if we do a small research, our contact, it has been proved mathematically that I know Bill Gates, if I had to go only 3 steps, the third person or fourth person will be Bill Gates. So if I can find out, so if I can do this, we can pull our sleeves, we can get the foreign this one. They will also add, because we are seeing a global village, technology driven.
So it is a win-win situation.
It's a win-win situation.
There was one particular argument that had come, was why do you confine to only the top 100? Because if they don't come, all that you had planned may not come. Open it up a little bit, let the top 200 institutions come in. This has been a suggestion, it has not been incorporated.
No, I will go to other point of view of C.K. Prahlad, bottom of the pyramid. Why top? Give it to the, see, do you want to, they are already developed, and what more development they want? I want the bottom institute to develop. So give them a challenge. Right?
Okay,
So
the
pick up
bottom
this-
of the institutions, whoever wants to come, let them come, fire in the belly, and that's how it will work. Another important point that has come out in that discussion, and which is there very much in the new education policy, and which was reverberated with all my friends who are here, who were part of the whole process of doing the study for revival of the economy at the village level. College had taken up the study. We covered all the 12 panchayats in Sattari Taluka. And what has come out very strongly is that they are saying agriculture is our mainstay. Agriculture has to be developed. Fortunately for us, the revival of agriculture gets prominent mention in the professional education that you have talked about. What are your views?
See, agriculture has been the backbone of our country, and that is the lip service we are providing to this particular sector. As of today, I don't see, let's just consider Goa, I don't see much progress being done in the field of agriculture in terms of investment, in terms of new technology. We still resort to bullock carts, pardon me, but in the villages, I belong to a village, in the villages we still resort to bullock carts. Our agriculture progress is an aggregate of individual attempts at each individual level, village level, nothing more. The moment we stop providing lip service of this nature, we would arrive at something.
Okay. Economists there, what are your views? How, since you were part of that study and also belong to the core team that eventually submitted the report to the government, what do you think is the mantra for revival of agriculture, especially in our state?
See, if I go through the NEP, whatever we have got from the village surveys, we find the similar type of things, provisions made. And if actually those provisions are implemented, if it comes in a true sense, then it would be possible to develop agriculture sector.
So you mean to say that the suggestion that we have collated all the panchayats all over Goa,
Yeah.
when the final draft will be presented at the end of September to the government, at least that is part of our effort to ensure that agriculture finds its place of prominence in the Goan economy. Friends, we are running short
in
of
that, actually, agriculture education has to be integrated with part and parcel of the general education, so that it would be possible for a person to be on agriculture, and then of course it requires the revival and then training. All these things would be, internship is also considered in some areas.
She mentioned it very well, and she mentioned about pottery and other things. आपका और क्या राय है एग्रीकल्चर के बारे में? क्या होना चाहिए स्टूडेंट्स?
छात्रों को जो पारंपरिक पद्धति होती है खेती करने की, उसका ज्ञान मिलेगा, ऐसा उस पॉलिसी में है सर। तो पहले क्या होता था कि बच्चे पढ़ते हैं तो वो उनकी जो पारंपरिक, अगर उसके पिताजी, नाना जी, दादाजी जो भी है वो खेती करते हैं, तो वो सिर्फ पढ़ाई पे ध्यान देता था। पर अब क्या होगा कि पढ़ाई के साथ उन्हें ये भी ज्ञान दिया जाएगा, तो उसे उसमें भी रुचि होगी, और उसके घर में अगर खेती की जाती है, घर के लोग, तो उसे लगेगा कि हमारे घर में भी है और अब पढ़ाया भी जा रहा है, तो क्यों ना उसी के साथ ही आगे चला जाऊँ।
What was, you had done a study of a predominantly agricultural village, you and Sufala. Tell me one issue that you need to do to ensure that agriculture picks up in that village. Just one.
So the panchayat should reach to the locals. Very important.
So the schemes.
Subsidies, and then funding. Because they are saying, like, we have been doing agriculture, we have been cultivating the crops, but we haven't received the subsidy which was supposed to be assigned to us last year.
So the convergence has not happened, and this I think has come out very clearly. Friends, I have a lot of things to discuss, but I will certainly take a break and throw the session open for discussion. Anyone has a query, you can specify whom you are asking the question so that that person could respond to you. If the mic, yes. We have Professor Sharath who would like to ask a question. If a mic can be taken to Professor Sharath there.
It's not exactly a query, but I would like to address it basically to Mr. Sarkar and Professor Suktankar. Both of them have voiced what actually has been lurking in my mind the moment I started reading about this national education policy. One is, the implementation, crux of that is implementation, they said. And the second important point on which both of them disagreed is the issue of starting the education at age 3. Now, I would like to mention 2 points here. One, all these people, the intellectuals who have been dissecting the National Education Policy 2020 to threadbare and coming out with suggestions have all come out of the old system. They have not gone, may or may not have gone, many of us have not gone to the informal education as it is called in the extent system. We have gone straight away to standards. When we were age 6, we went to standard first. But still we were able to cope with the syllabus curriculum and still we were able to develop ourselves. One was the child has an inherent capacity to acquire certain natural skills like numeracy and identifying the objects and colors and identifying certain concepts. Of course, be it at home. And secondly, we have been talking about teacher-centric approach. Now, the motivation for the teachers has already been mentioned very clearly in the policy. But what is the motivation for the child to go to the school? Like we came across with so many students here, top 2% to do very well, 80% they are just not interested. Now, when you start taking the child to the school system, formal education system at the age of 3 itself, you are sacrificing the child's childhood. It is like a Chinese government taking possession of a child at the age of 5 because they want that child to win a gold medal in the Olympics. All these things happen only when you start working, keeping in mind the goal at first. I want to achieve a global citizen, and then you come down. It's not going from the bottom to the top, it's coming from top to the bottom.
Yes. I think Professor Sharath has made his point very clear, echoing the sentiments of the gentleman both to my left and right, of whether we are sacrificing the childhood as we understand
I
today.
just want to one more point. The motivation for the student is missing. That's what I said. And many of the students in India especially started going to school because there was a midday meal. We don't get home food at home, at least one food I'll get rid of. Now to add to that, we are also giving them breakfast. So the double motivation is there, both of which will not serve the purpose. So the basic thing is, you have to, but the child who learns how to operate a mobile without any formal education, what is the motivation? The pleasure in it. But in the new education policy, two very important things are there. The school education should be engaging and enjoyable. How do we make that? It seems to be next to impossible. And the second thing is, the motivation for the student has to come from the larger section of the society. Say that, okay, you finish your 5th standard, you are going to get this. Like the child who has a mobile in his hand knows that if he learns how to operate a few buttons, he would be able to play a game. That's the motivation. That is the engaging and enjoyable quality. What do you have to offer in the education system?
Maybe in the school level, they are talking about, the Goa University was already talking about professors of practice. And in fact, that has come out very clearly. And I think if Goa could show the way of getting in what Priyanka has been saying, getting in people who are experts in their field as faculty to teach. Maybe a basket weaver from Pedne, Ibrahimpur is known for basket weaving among the scheduled caste community. If you can get that person, talk in the local language, and he explains to them that this is a skill that I would like to teach you. Pottery, carving, or whatever you talk about. I think that could be one step towards making education enjoyable. Because the child comes in the class, sees only that homework and goes away. There is nothing to do. And maybe that to do would change the focus from education which is hated to education which is that. Point well taken. And I think we need to look at it, not just at the school level, but as you rightly said, the 80% that we have in our collegiate system who would wait for the first opportunity to run away from a class, and they would say, let us not have. And many of them have confessed that they have come because their parents have sent them. Yeah. Any other question? Any other, you can make a point, you can ask a question. If there is no questions, I will make my concluding remarks. Friends, education is a process by which a society deliberately transmits its accumulated knowledge, skills, and values. And I would like to emphasize on the word knowledge, skills, and values from one generation to another. It is the basis of development and empowerment of the generation to come. The welcome sign in this new education policy is that it just does not focus on the transmission of knowledge, but also the skills, and more importantly, the local skills that need to be transmitted from one generation to another. And more importantly, the values. At some point of time, you have seen fundamental rights were what we were talking about. All the time, you talk about fundamental rights. These are my fundamental rights. Today, we are teaching the younger generation that there are also fundamental duties that you need to perform. And I think the focus has been good. How well this will be implemented will only be tested by time. Many of us may not be in the system to witness the changes that may happen in 2035, 2030. But nevertheless, a debate, a discussion that will make us aware and will also tell us that we are aware or that we are aware. And I think that was the whole exercise that was the whole rationale for starting this exercise. Of course, the mandate has come from the University Grants Commission that we need to do an exercise like this, and we intend to send whatever deliberations that we have had today to send it to our controlling office, the Directorate of Higher Education. One of the incisive articles that I was reading by Arvind Panagriya, who was formerly in the Niti Aayog, now he's a professor at Columbia. He talks about this policy, and Mr. Salkar has been talking about whether it will be implemented or not implemented. There are time frames given. He talks about a strategy, and the strategy is you first concentrate on the low-hanging fruits. The fruits which you get out of this policy, which are low-hanging, which you can reach out within a short period of time, could be the fruits that you take. And he identifies this low-hanging fruits, which targets which are achievable within the next 5 years. And I'm sure many of us will be there around in that next 5 years to see whether the new education policy is really working or not. And some of these are conversions of leading colleges into board administrated autonomous degree giving higher education institution, freeing undergrads to take courses across disciplines. We already have the choice-based credit system. Can we leverage that and ensure that our students get that? Opening India to foreign universities. Professor Suktankar has been saying he's not alarmed that the foreign universities, in fact, he welcomes them, provided they also recognize the local talent. Launch of the 4-year degree program. We have had a discussion yesterday on this, where the student will be given adequate skills transmission along with the knowledge and the values. Vocationalization of education in college curriculum that has come out very strongly when our student stakeholder has talked about. Creation of the National Research Foundation, which can be created shortly, and the benefits can roll out immediately. It doesn't take much time. If the National Research Foundation gets established soon, it can roll out. There could be even possibilities where students enrolled in the 4-year degree program could be part and parcel of writing research, high caliber research papers along with the faculty. So these are the things that he has been talking about. This is an idea that I have been floating with many people. I have spoken this idea with Ashok. In fact, even coaxed him whether he could find some possibility. Because how this vocationalization happen? We are in our straitjacket as teachers, hardly having any experience of industry. They do their job, we do their job, we are in our silos. If one step if Goa could do, and we will strongly recommend this to the government of Goa, that if teachers could take a break, let us say one semester, go back, let's say Ashok, I was talking to Ashok, I said, Ashok, go and work in some pharmaceutical firm. Work for a semester, come back. It could be across discipline. A commerce teacher can get into a firm, does something. Somebody would like to get a taste of journalism. I come and work in Mr. Sarkar's firm. I work under his tutelage. I see how opinions are formed. Or somebody else. This could be one step where we could really make, because teaching cannot come in formal forms. The best way is at the shop floor. I would like to give you the Asian Paints success story. Asian Paints for some time was doing very badly. And the son had gone out, he had started MBA in one of the top management institutes in the world. He came back and his father ensured that he works at the shop floor. He went on getting promoted, but he understood the whole system. And Asian Paints today is a big success story, because that's where you earn your spurs. And if this could be a concrete suggestion with all that we have got, a concrete suggestion that we would like to be suggesting to the higher education, and we could be the first college to at least try in whatever limited measure that we can have to release at least a couple of teachers initially, so that we balance our teaching learning processes in the college. Send them there, bring them back. And if that happens, the issue which you had raised, internship certificates are just bought and Japanese just signs and brings. Maybe when we have these insights, I think a lot would happen. Even the certification, let us say, of a chemistry teacher is done by the industry. He reports to somebody. I wouldn't mind reporting to somebody in journalism there, work for some time and come back. I would have learned so many things when I'm actually doing the job. Many of you would agree that much of our subject knowledge is gained when we actually start teaching. So with that, I would like to profusely thank our speakers who have come here. Professor Suktankar, it was just at a message that I had sent to him that he said yes. Mr. Sarkar had one day, I told him he'll live 100 years, because I was just talking about him and he walked into my chamber a week back, and I told him at a short notice, I'm telling you, please come, and he obliged us. Thank you very much for spending your time. Principal Sinari, who is our ex-student, thank you for coming. He is very busy. He has to rush back for his other work. But thank you so much for coming here. I would like to thank our student representative. It takes effort and time and seriousness to go through the document and put the viewpoint of a student. Thank you very much and God bless you. And we wish your tribe increases in an educational institution. We have two of our professors here, Professor Sonia Sirsat, who was one of the speakers for the technical session, Professor Seema Rath, who have been here. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank both the IQAC as well as the Staff Academy. This was done by both these. We have the Staff Academy and we have the IQAC. IQAC, we have our member here, Professor Suktankar is a member of our IQAC. These two committees of the college, the think tanks of the college, put this so meticulously. They drew out the session, they talked about who would take which session, etc. I'm very thankful to them. I'm thankful to the other speakers. Dr. Vaibhav is here, Dr. Mukund, Dr. Bedigher, who spoke. the people who chaired the session, and for every session we had a rapporteur who has been taking down whatever is there. We have a couple of days that we have to wrap up our report and send it. A very concise report will be sent to the Directorate of Higher Education. Thank you, teachers, for taking so much of interest and spending your time in this valuable exercise that we have undertaken. Today is the last day before we break for the Ganesh festival. Lord Ganesha is a Lord of wisdom. And what more do I wish you all than to invoke the blessings of Lord Ganesha on all of us. Because if we have to make and build a modern India, I think we are a strong pillar of that stakeholder theory that we talk about. And as teachers, I think we need that wisdom in abundance. Let Lord Ganesha bless us all and keep us in his care as we get into yet another year after the festival. We are starting the academic year, which was postponed because of the pandemic, tentatively on 1st September. I wish everything goes on well, but we need to go on. And pandemic or no pandemic, we need to go on.